Beth and Taylor. Welcome to In Her Bag. I'm very excited to have both of you here from Fluffy. So I'm gonna have you guys just share a little bit more about yourselves, your background, and what it is that you do. And Taylor, we can start with you.
Sure. So first and foremost, thank you for having us. We're so excited to be here. So I am Taylor Long. I am a partner in Fluffy, which is a size inclusivity consulting agency. Outside of that, I'm also a working plus size model and the founder, designer, and CEO of Nomad Swimwear, which is a size inclusive, sustainable swimwear and resort wear brand. Yeah.
Hi, and I'm Beth Hitchcock. I'm also a partner in Fluffy. I have been in the fashion industry for over 15 years now. Actually, Taylor and I went to the same university and got our same degree in fashion design. And then since then, I have been working in multiple facets of the industry. So I started out in publishing at Condé Nast, moved into styling, also do some modeling, and have worked with like teams on creative direction, marketing. So I've kind of done it all, and started Fluffy because I was seeing that big disconnect between what brands were putting out and what consumers were wanting. And I feel like all of my experience has led to this. And so I'm very excited, that Taylor and I are doing this together and hoping to, make real change and just create a better, well, not only just the fashion industry, but a better world in general that feels inclusive.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just do like a little bit more of like a deep dive in on exactly what is Fluffy.
So Fluffy is a consultancy that focuses on body diversity and size inclusion. So the original intent was let's help the fashion industry. So, that's both of our backgrounds, but it was let's help these brands who want to get into the extended size market, want to get into the size inclusive market. It can be a scary transition for people, I think, of making the wrong steps. And so the purpose was like, we're going to be here to hold your hand as experts to walk you through this from start to finish, from, the design process, the grading scale, into the marketing, into the community building, and like all touch points across what you're doing. As it was being developed, we were like, wait, education's huge here. So there was also a lot of focus on that too. So working with marketing teams, ad teams, and doing like corporate training. There's kind of a lot there that we do. But yeah, the main focus is size inclusion and body diversity and helping brands.
I think it's important to note too why that's so important because here in Danielle, I know you're in Canada, but here in the US, the average American woman is a size 18, so that makes up 70% of US women, and it's a $290 billion market that is largely untapped. So companies are just leaving money on the table, and to Beth's point, a lot of it comes from the not understanding how to properly design, market, put into stores. There's so many facets that go into it. So where we come in is we're really that through line to help companies in all facets of their business really make sure that they are, introducing those products properly, making sure that it's marketed the right way, making sure they're using the right language, visually. Like there's a lot of components that come into it, and that's where we come in to help.
Yeah. And so why do you think brands have such a challenge with inclusivity, especially considering the size of the market? Like you mentioned, that's a lot of money left on the table. That's a lot of women who are being grossly underserved and just not being valued as just people and as consumers, but also just there's just so much opportunity to really fill this gap. Like why do you think there's a miss there?
I think it's twofold. I think first and foremost, there just is a general issue of fat phobia. So when you think about like people in positions of power, right? Rarely ever are they plus size. So there's not even people that have that struggle that are in those positions to be able to make those decisions. I think especially when it comes to design and fashion specifically, those implicit biases are rampant. So, Beth, I'm sure, yeah, I would imagine you had a similar experience, even though we weren't there at the same time. But for instance, in design school, we were not taught how to draw inclusively. Like you were only taught how to draw, they call them croquis. So that's what you would sketch your clothing onto, like the model. I was told in my very first drawing class, this is like the very first class you take as soon as you start school, that we were to make our croquis look sickly. And then when you think, and then when you think about like patterning, you're only taught how to do it for size small. And what the issue with that is when you get into the larger sizes, you can make the same pieces essentially for, you know, smaller folks and plus size folks. There just are little considerations you have to make. But if you don't know how to make those considerations, how would you know how to do that once you get into the industry? When you think about draping, our like mannequins, our forms that we would use for draping, we had two for the entire fashion design program, and that's hundreds and hundreds of kids. And it just wasn't encouraged. Like even when I was doing Nomads was my senior capstone collection in design school, and I remember I got shit on my for my muslin critique. I had professors telling me my stuff wasn't flattering. I had an industry crit tell me I'd need to better research my market. And if I had listened to that, Nomads wouldn't be a thing. So it's really a top down issue from what people are being taught in school. And then that translates to exactly what you're seeing in the market. So I think it's a general, just fat phobicness that's happening. And then I think there's a lack of education. There's just a lot that plays into it. And then I think because you do have to do it correctly, and if you don't, it will be a costly mistake. That keeps a lot of companies from wanting to take that leap when there is so much money out there and they just genuinely don't know how. And I'm not saying that that's an excuse. I don't think it is. I think it's similar to, hairstylists going on set and not knowing how to do black hair. Like, I don't think you should be able to call yourself a stylist if you can't do all hair types. Similarly with a designer, you should be able to design for all body types. That should be a just a baseline standard, but that unfortunately is not the case.
Yeah. So on that, like Beth, so from your work at Fluffi, what would you say are some of the most common misconceptions that brands have about plus size consumers, and how do you help them overcome those?
There's been a lot. And as Taylor mentioned, fat phobia plays a huge role in that. One that I've gotten a lot from more premium brands is the reason they have not become size inclusive is that they feel that there's not like plus size consumers who have money, basically. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, it's wild, and you're like, whoa. Like, again, as Taylor pointed out, it's a $290 billion industry. 70% of women fit that category, and you're saying there's not money there. And so there's like this, there's so many catch-22s that happen of, a brand saying, like a wholesale brand, like, hey, we want to do this, but the stores we sell through, like the retailers that sell multiple brands don't want to buy our bigger sizes. So we don't want to create them. So there's like things like that. And then there's the, we only see plus size consumers buying, cheap, trendy clothes. Well, that's what's out there. Yeah. So that's what they're buying, like, yeah. If one of these premium expensive brands that are quality are offering things in their sizes, they'll be buying them, but they don't. So it's like, of course they're buying at like Fashion Nova and Shein because that's what's available, So I would say, yeah, it's just like a lot of misconceptions about the customer, about how plus size shoppers shop, what's being offered, what they've always had available, which is not much. And yeah.
The other thing I would say too, to your point, Beth, is some companies are straight up, they don't want plus size customers to shop their brands. They don't want them to be associated with them. They think that's going to be a turnoff to their straight customers, and they're very vocal about that. So there's some that just genuinely aren't interested in it at all.
Yes, exactly.
And so even like apart from just on like what Beth was saying, it becomes like a supply and demand issue where there's tons of demand, but for some reason there's just no supply.
Mm-hmm.
Taylor, so what challenges have you faced personally as a founder designing for diverse body types, and how have you navigated through those?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's made to seem like it's this big scary thing, and it's really not hard. Like, I think people do not want to take the time. Like, of course it's going to take a little bit more time to make sure you get the right fit across sizes. It's going to take a little bit more effort, and some people don't want to put that in. You might be paying a little bit more because you're sampling more. But to me, of course it's worth it when you think of, the market opportunity, but also just from the lens of, I never want to be a designer that makes people feel unwelcome. I want everyone to feel like that they can shop at Nomads. Granted, it's a little bit more of a premium tier brand, but at the same point, you're still, the barrier of entry is not size. It's never going to be size for me. So that has been something that's been baked in from the beginning. We started out.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No worries. We started out with sizes small to 4X. Now we're extra small to 5X and everything. That's the equivalent of sizes 0 to 32. That's definitely one of the most inclusive size ranges in all of the fashion industry, but especially within swim and especially within premium swim. So one of the problems that I ran into, especially from a wholesale perspective, was the retailers were not set up to accommodate that expansive as a size range. So it was a lot of me having to advocate for, hey, like, this is a customer that wants to shop with you all. And it's also, I had to kind of sweeten the deal a little bit, which it wasn't hard to do, but making sure it was like they were able to do it at their pace, essentially. So like my, non-negotiable was, you need to carry the entire size range, but you don't have to adhere to these really large, quantity totals, minimum order quantities for those larger sizes. You can test it, we can help you with that. And in doing so, they had to update their internal company-wide purchase ordering systems to even be able to accommodate us. So that's how big of a change that was for them. So we had to do that with Anthropologie. We did that with Shopbop. I believe we're doing this. I think it was a similar situation with Newly now, who will have up to size 5X. So it's really having to be intentional and being unafraid of having those conversations with people and making the ask. I think for brands out there that are size inclusive that may be intimidated by that, it's just a conversation. You just simply have to put it out there and state your case. And a lot of times they will be open to it. But in some cases, they won't be. Like, I had a conversation with a retailer recently who needs it, like desperately needs the inclusive sizing, and people are begging for it. And they just straight up said that they don't, until they see more of a need for it and that there's more, money in it for them, they're not going to do it. And I'm like, well, I don't know what else to tell you, because it's so. You can't force people, but if they want to get in their own way, then you got to let them.
Yeah. And you are a designer and a retailer, so you know how it is possible to.
And that's the thing. I think that's what gets so frustrating is I have a tenth, maybe not even that, of the budget of these larger companies, and I'm doing it. So I call BS on all of the other ones that say that they can't, because if I can, anybody can.
Yeah. Yeah. And even being on like the modeling side of it, like Beth. So tell me a little bit more about like your experience like within that space and kind of like what led you to being like, you know what, I'm sick of this, we need a solution, and Fluffi is going to be it.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, speaking more from my styling experience, I think is where I saw it the most. Because I've worked with so many huge brands over the years, and not just on shoots, but being in office and working in between, their marketing teams, their design teams, and hearing everything that's going on and the conversations that are going on behind the scenes before shoots even happen. And and I mean, it's still happening. I mean, just literally 2 months ago, I was doing a style out at a very big brand that everyone knows, store. And the feedback they were getting on the feedback they were giving on the plus size looks that I was doing was like, make it matronly. Like, they wanted it to feel covered up and older. And I'm like, stop doing this, and it's like, and I'm seeing the model they're planning on putting it on. She's young. I'm like, why are we doing this? It's not meant to be an older look. Or they're like, let's do this. And I'm like, well, that model has huge boobs. Like, that's going to look like you're literally making her look matronly.
Yeah.
Like, so there's just been so many instances where I was seeing this, or I mean, literally, I remember on set, this was like when I was an assistant, I was on set on a swim shoot in Mexico, and I heard a creative director call a size 6 model fat, like being like, "Ooh, she's looking big, like let's not put her in there, like take her out." Brands who will do like family shots, and the plus size woman never has a husband, and she's like the aunt, like the single aunt. I mean, and this happens all the time. When you look at those family shoots next time, look, like the plus size model is always just by herself.
Yeah.
It's very strange to me that people don't see that that's happening. I mean, it's deep rooted fat phobia, and that's what it is. And it plays across brands. And as Taylor mentioned earlier, you rarely see plus size women in power in these companies, and a lot of the times it's run by men, and it's the trickle down effect.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're not seeing that, like, what you're doing is bias, and this is trickling down into like literally the images that you're putting out for your company, then it's a problem.
Ending cycle.
Yeah, it's a never ending cycle. So yeah, I mean, like I literally was keeping notes since I was a styling assistant of things I would hear on set, things I would see, things brands were just putting out that I'm like, why would you do that? I mean, Loft is a big example of that, where they did this whole launch of a whole plus, like they weren't plus size at all.
Mm-hmm.
Until I want to say it was 2019. Then they launched a plus size division. Everyone was so excited. And it was just like they just didn't hit the mark, because they literally designed everything differently than what they had been doing.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, we want the same thing, just in our size.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to make a whole new collection that doesn't even feel like Loft and is
Yeah,
not
I think that's what gets
working.
lost. It's like they think they should reinvent the wheel, and it's like, you don't. Just make bigger sizes of what, and perfect the fit, of course, but just make what you're already doing bigger. It's not hard.
Yeah.
But if they're thinking to themselves, oh well, a plus size customer isn't cool enough to wear this, or isn't gonna buy, then of course they're not gonna. But they need to change, just rewire their thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this is what I appreciate about like both of your perspectives on this, is that it's not even like you approach this necessarily as the consumer. Like you see this very much like on the back end, like how achievable this is, how accessible it is, and that there's like a very conscious decision being made to just not do it. And so what would be some advice that you would give to a startup or a small business that maybe hasn't considered inclusive because they just think it's going to be too expensive, or maybe they want to but they just don't know what the starting point is? Like, how would you recommend for a new business to just be inclusive from the jump?
I would say, first and foremost, it's okay to start small. Like, even just from the lens of like your entire product offering, whether you were planning to be inclusive or not, like start small and test. And that way you can really build it out. You can get customer feedback. You can really perfect your fit before you get into everything else. I don't think from a fashion brand perspective, more specifically, that it has to be a huge 10 to 12 piece collection. Like, you can start with some hero pieces and really like get that feedback and make sure you're doing things correctly, but that'll make it a lot more digestible and easier to do so inclusively. For brands that are not fashion geared, think of your marketing. What verbiage are you using? Please, for the love of God, in 2025, can we please get rid of the word flattering? I hate that word. Subjective, but everybody uses that as a way to police plus size women. Like, she shouldn't wear that, it's not flattering. It's like, to you, it's not flattering to you.
Mm-hmm.
She may think she looks great, she may love what she's wearing, and that is her prerogative, but like, please, for like, just nix the word flattering altogether. Be really intentional about casting models. If you're having to do any sort of marketing shoots, like, even if you don't have a big budget, you can get one straight size girl, you can get one plus size girl, and that's fine, and that's enough, and that shows that you have already like been thinking about implementing inclusivity in other ways outside of just your product offering. So I think there are little ways that people can do it, but think about product offerings, marketing verbiage, and then what kind of models and things you're going to use to cast and portray your brand.
Yeah. And Beth?
Yeah. I mean, everything that she said. Yes. I agree with her. It's like start small. And, I mean, Taylor has definitely more experience with smaller startup brands than I do. I definitely have, I've worked more with like big established brands, but it's the same concept of like, it can be overwhelming to like fully dive in and fully become like, hey, we're going from like, we only went up to a size 12 to now we're going up to a size 32 and everything. Like, that's not necessarily, that's easier said than done, right? So I think I agree with her where it's like test it, like do test runs, like and make sure you're hitting it across all touch points. Like that's super important. And I feel like a lot of brands miss where it's like, you may offer a few things in a 2X, but you're not showing it in your advertising. You're not merchandising it on your website so that it's easy to find. You're not showing it on your social media. You're not working with plus size influencers. So people don't know to shop your brand, right? Yeah. Or it's confusing. You're like, hey, I know you say you have 2X, but when I go on your site, I don't see it anywhere. So things like that, where it's just like being consistent and like working with all the teams. I mean, I think that's where we come in, right? Is we're that liaison between everybody and making sure, because and you would think that this isn't a problem, but it happens all the time. I see it all the time that like the designers do something, they don't talk to the marketing team, so they don't even know to promote it. And this is like all people that are working together, but there's no one there that's like, make sure we're doing this across everything. Like make sure we're showing this authentically at every touch point. So yeah, it's like having just that well thought out internal strategy before you go into market.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of mistakes are made.
Yeah,
for sure.
Danielle, I know your question was geared more towards smaller, smaller companies. I would say too, obviously you have a draw and you have brought in some larger folks, especially for like this kind of programming. So I would say too, some advice for larger brands as well is I, as a consumer, can appreciate, like, say you haven't been doing size inclusivity or plus sizes in the past, but if there's a layer of transparency there, like, hey, we know we haven't been doing this. These are the steps we're taking to make that right, and kind of showing the process too and showing the intentionality behind it, I think speaks volumes. It doesn't have to be this like secret thing and then it's one big launch, because I sometimes am a little overwhelmed by that, because it's like, you didn't like us like 2 months ago and now all of a sudden you have my, like, it's kind of like a weird, like, I don't know. It's kind of a weird thing, I think, to do it that way. So I would honestly suggest like being open to being transparent on those kind of changes you're making on the back end. Because I think it reads a lot more genuine than just like a secret launch that, you get bombarded with.
Yeah, I agree. And especially with like Gen Z, with younger consumers, like they want transparency.
Yeah.
That's important. So yeah, I 100% agree with that.
Completely right through it whenever there's something that's completely inauthentic. Whenever something just feels like a money grab, they're like, ew, no, absolutely not. But I mean, even with Fluffy, you have very comprehensive service offerings. And so, what was the first step, or what is the first step that you would recommend to brands who are looking to embrace size inclusivity meaningfully?
It kind of depends where the brand is at in that journey, obviously. If it's brand new to them, they haven't tried it at all. I would say start with the focus groups. So start with plus size consumers and get an idea of like, how do people feel about your brand? Just from the start, like do that research ahead of time to see where you stand with the plus size consumer, how they view your brand, even what they want to see from your brand. And then from there, it's like the starting small, like do the test run, do the smaller capsule of what you're already doing, but maybe you're extending sizes in what you're already doing, and see how it goes and test it with those plus size consumers, get that feedback, do the events, do the community building to get people for people to see that you're doing this, right? Like that's the other, like Taylor had mentioned, the secret launch, like be vocal about it and be honest about it and show that you're trying. Like Dolce Vita recently launched their extended sizing, and I had a friend who helped them with that, and I know that they went through there was a lot of processes of fittings and focus groups and getting the feedback from actual consumers before they ever launched it, which I think is super important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Taylor, is there anything that you would want to add into that?
I mean, Beth pretty much hit on the nose for me. I think, especially if you're just starting out, that research phase is going to be crucial. I think outside of just understanding what the plus size consumer wants, it's also seeing if you can pinpoint where other brands have misstepped and actively work to avoid those. Because there's a lot of examples of people not doing it well. Too many, unfortunately. If they had hired Fluffy, that wouldn't have happened. But but there's a lot of information out there, in addition to the feedback that they get from consumer groups that I think is really helpful. And then, yeah, the starting small. But I think one thing Beth said that really built upon what I was saying before is being like unapologetic about it, being loud about it. I think so many brands are so hush hush and they like don't want it to be a failure, but are actively like doing things to make it that. But if you're again very intentional, leading with intentionality and empathy, I think that's the other thing too. People always it's really easy, of course, to come at it from a money perspective, but I think if they're able to purely put themselves in the position of how would I feel if I went to a store and they did not have anything in my size, no
Mm-hmm.
shoes, no dresses, no shirts, no jeans, no nothing, how would I feel? You'd feel
Mm-hmm.
like shit. Anybody would. So it's like it's thinking of it from that perspective too. I think so many people don't lead with empathy, and with that comes money. It just does, because people are they're gonna appreciate the fact that you thought of them and that they can now shop your brand when maybe they couldn't before.
Yeah. And,
Yes, yes, yes.
and
Like, lead with empathy.
And all the things. But
Yes.
especially
even on that, so you being, a designer, also running your own e-commerce business, what are some of the things that make you like, just completely lead with that? Like leading with empathy is of course very important, but what are some of the other things that you lead with to build a brand that is not only inclusive, but just like really makes people feel seen?
Yeah, I mean, I think the empathy is one thing for sure. I think it's also like having the passion behind it. I don't think anybody that gets in this line of work with zero capital at the start is doing it for the sake of money. You're just not, because it takes a long time. It takes a long time to see that return. It takes a long time to be able to pay yourself to do all the things. So you have to really be in it and really love it. So I think the empathy and passion combo is like a non-negotiable. You have to really like eat, sleep, live your brand. And I think that is also felt by the consumer, right? Like I think outside of the empathy piece, like they can tell when the person who's leading the brand, especially at a smaller scale, is in it with their whole heart. Like you can tell a disingenuous, brand or product or whatever from a mile away. So I think those are two really important qualities. And then just leading that, like having that lead your decision making, right? Having that be present in everything. And I think it really shines through in the end.
Yeah. And so, Beth, what are some innovative marketing strategies that Fluffy uses to help brands genuinely connect with the plus size community?
Um,
And you don't have to give us all your secret sauce.
um, no, I mean, again, I think it varies so much, and I mean, I think that's so special about what we do is that we really tailor it to the brand and where they are in the journey. Um, but we've pointed out some of them previously in this conversation. So things like, um, who are you casting, right, in your advertising, in your photo shoots? Like, is it like if you're showing plus size, are they genuinely plus size? um how are we showing up on social media? Who are the influencers that you're working with when you have events? Like, are you only inviting a token plus size model, or maybe you're actually doing what you say you're going to do and being fully inclusive?
Also making sure you have the product for the plus size influencer if you're inviting the plus size influencer. There's
That's a
been
big thing
many,
too.
so many examples where people will try to pander and invite plus size talent and then have nothing for them at the event when they show up.
Yeah.
That
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's exactly that. Like being true to your word and what you're putting out there, is just so important. So, and again, like as Taylor mentioned, like people can tell when a brand is disingenuous. So, if you're using a plus size model and you only go up to an XL, like that's not okay because most people then can't wear your clothes. So you shouldn't be using a plus size model to show your clothes. And we all know a very big brand who's done that. So I would say that's like the main thing is just being like authentic and being true to your word.
Yeah. So, what's one piece of advice you'd give to brands on creating size inclusive products that resonate with their target audience?
Say that again.
Oh, what's one piece of advice you would give to brands on creating size inclusive products that resonate with their target audience?
Um,
I mean, I think it's kind of similar to what we've said before, but do your research, talk to the consumer prior to designing, launching any of it, and then being intentional.
yeah. And don't other the plus size consumer. Um, they should be, it shouldn't feel like um they're doing them a favor or throwing breadcrumbs their way to like offer them things. Like they should be a part of the vision and the plan. And plus size consumers are actually sorry, what's the word I'm looking for? They're also trendsetters, like they're visionaries, they're people that you can look to for inspiration. So I think there's a lot of like that feeling of a brand breadcrumbing, of like throwing you a few things so you shop with them, but like they don't care. And so that's the case with like any marginalized group. Like brands do that all the time and it doesn't feel good. And as Taylor pointed out before, like how do you want to feel when you're shopping somewhere
Yeah.
as a
Maybe you
consumer?
catch 22, like in the I think a brand may hear that and say, well, you're saying you can only offer, a few pieces, but then it'll feel like breadcrumbing. It's not if you're intentional about how you launch it, about how you present it, about it feeling like a true extension of the brand. So it's like you can do
Hmm.
that, but there's a way to do it where it doesn't feel breadcrumby.
Yeah. Definitely
Hmm.
getting back to the why. Um, okay. Well, lastly, how do you see the size inclusive market evolving in the next 5 years? And what is something that makes you excited about that?
I think it's going to be a fight, honestly. I think
Feel
with
the same
the
way.
fallback of DEI, we certainly have our work cut out for us. But I think I don't know of other folks out there that are presenting it in such a way like Beth and I. I think we have a really unique kind of skill set in that we have this really symbiotic experience of having been models and seeing the back end, but then we also have the KPIs and the success of nomads that we can really utilize to our advantage when we're making the case to these larger companies. So I think in that regard, I think we'll be really successful, but I do think it is going to be an uphill battle, unfortunately.
Yeah. I feel the same. If I'm being honest, I feel very nervous for what's happening with size inclusivity. As we've all seen, it was like moving full steam ahead. Then it was like stalled. And now with the new man in office, I will say, it's a little bit, it's frightening. It is. And I mean, DEI in general is just, it's up for a battle. So, um, and size inclusivity fits within that. And we had talked about this like very briefly before we started, Danielle, of like, is this size inclusivity DEI or is it just like living? Like, I don't know. I'm like, everyone has a body and everyone has issues with their bodies. And like, I feel like it's something that like really affects everyone. And it's not just necessarily about the plus size consumer, but it's also about like people's, I mean, how do people feel about themselves? Like, do people truly love what they look like? And are brands representing like real people?
Yeah.
And I feel like that's not, I mean, plus size people aren't going away. Bigger sizes aren't going away. And in fact, like those things are growing. Like diversity is growing. So us like taking these things away isn't really I mean, we all know it's not helping anyone, but like I think when it comes to size inclusivity specifically, I don't know. I feel nervous. I also feel nervous because of like Ozempic and just
That was the other thing.
women's bodies in particular being treated as trends, and it trending towards more thin versus like, hey, like it's like body neutrality, right? Like, can we just like live in our bodies and be happy with who we are and stop trying to fit a mold? And how do we stop brands from perpetuating this like over and over and over again? Because it's just the same cycle that continues and continues and continues. And it's exhausting and frustrating. And I hope that, you know, like as Taylor said, like I do think we have a unique perspective and unique skill sets that I hope that we are able to make real change. But yeah, it's a battle, an uphill battle.
And that's definitely going to be something that I think we're all very excited to see the impact that you two make and the companies that it is that you'll be working with and the shifts that they'll be making, the tides that they'll be turning. Fingers crossed that you two make one heck of an impact over the next 4 years and then even more after that. But in any case, thank you both for joining us today. Can you tell us where people can find you online?
Yeah. So our Instagram is Love Fluffi, LOVEFLUFFI. And then the website is the same, lovefluffy.com. I'm Beth Hitchcock, so my Instagram is Beth Hitchcock. And
Echoing all the fluffy things, I am at Taylor Page Long on Instagram, and then just shameless plug for Nomads. We're at Nomads, NOMADS swimwear.com, and then Nomad Swimwear on Instagram as well.
Yeah. Oh, and we do a monthly newsletter. So it's linked in the bio of our Instagram. It's on our website, easily found. So if you want to like stay up to date on events we're doing, insights, industry insights, everything fluffy, we do a monthly newsletter. So sign up.
Okay, thank you so much
Yes.
for joining us.